Number 8. Kodak Black. Bill Kahan Capri, better known as Kodak Black, has a lengthy history of legal troubles dating at least as far back as 2015. That year he was arrested for kidnapping, assault, robbery, driving without a license, battery, and various other crimes in Pompano Beach, Florida, at the tender age of 18. In February the following year, he was accused of assaulting a woman in a South Carolina hotel room. Then 2 months later, the young rapper caught a gun charge after allegedly throwing a .40 caliber Glock out his car window during a police chase. A string of steady arrests followed. While on house arrest in early 2017, Kodak Black was charged with violating the conditions of his release. He was also accused of assaulting a bartender several months earlier, which impacted the decision to take him back into custody. As a consequence for his alleged violations, he spent more than 3 months in prison. The young star got in trouble yet again in early 2018, this time for posting an Instagram video of himself surrounded by what appeared to be weapons and drugs. To make matters even worse, his young child was nearby. Authorities charged Kodak Black with being a felon in possession of a gun, possession of cannabis, child neglect, and 2 counts of parole violation. He went back to prison for a few more months before regaining his freedom yet again. This time, however, it seemed as though the rapper was determined to turn his life around. He earned his GED and managed to get released without any probation. Unfortunately, just months later in mid-2019, he was nabbed at the Canadian border for trying to enter the US with a gun. He was sentenced to 3 years and 10 months in federal prison, but he only served a portion of it thanks to former President Donald Trump, who commuted his sentence in January 2021. However, Kodak Black still had some old charges to clean up and continued to catch more. His most recent brush with the law came in mid-2022 when he was arrested on felony drug charges. Number 7. Gunna and Young Thug. In late 2012, the Atlanta-based rappers Gunna and Young Thug, along with several co-conspirators, allegedly started a violent gang called the Young Slime Life, or YSL. Members of the criminal enterprise were said to have committed numerous carjackings, shootings, and murders over the course of a decade. The gang has known ties to the Bloods and is infamous for its brutal acts of violence. In an 88-page indictment from 2022, prosecutors accused the men of targeting other high-profile rappers. They also claimed that the rappers were already established gangsters by the time they broke onto the music scene. Young Thug, whose legal name is Jeffrey Lamar Williams, and Gunna, whose legal name is Sergio Kitchens, were charged with violating the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, Rico. While Young Thug's lawyer maintains that his client committed no crime whatsoever, Gunna entered an Alford plea, which means that he maintained his innocence but admitted that prosecutors most likely had enough evidence to secure a conviction against him. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, with credit for time served and the remainder of the term suspended. Gunna must also perform 500 hours of community service, including 350 hours which will be spent talking to young men about the dangers and consequences of gang violence. In a statement, he made it clear that he has not cooperated or agreed to testify against any other defendants. Young Thug and about a dozen others are slated to go on trial in early 2023. Number 6. Shyne. Moses Michael Levi Barrow was born in Belize in 1978, but he moved to New York City as a young man to pursue a rap career under the name Shyne. He became famous in the late 90s and performed with numerous multi-platinum artists, including Lil Wayne, Usher, Maze, Notorious B.I.G., and Puff Daddy. But just as his career began to take off, Shyne found himself entangled in a legal battle. It stemmed from a shooting he was involved in during the early morning hours on December 27, 1999, while in the company of Sean Puffy Combs and his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez. The trio were at a packed club in Manhattan when an argument broke out between Combs and a man named Matthew Scar Allen. According to some witnesses, all 3 men drew guns, and Shyne fired 3 bullets, injuring 3 bystanders. Another witness claimed that she saw both Shyne and Combs shoot their guns. Shyne was charged with criminal possession of a weapon, assault, reckless endangerment, and attempted murder, while Combs faced weapons-related charges. At the end of a 7-week trial, a jury acquitted Coombs of all charges. Shyne, on the other hand, was only acquitted of attempted murder, but was still convicted of assault, reckless endangerment, and the gun charge. He received a 10-year prison sentence and ultimately served 9 years and some change before regaining his freedom. Even while behind bars, Shyne was a highly revered member of the hip-hop community. He received many visits from record label representatives who were eager to sign him on, but he was unable to take advantage of the offers. This was due to a state law that prevents convicted criminals from profiting off of their publicity. In 2009, after he finished paying his debt to society, Shyne was placed in a federal immigration detention facility while his lawyers and the government fought over his immigration status. While he was a valid green card holder, he never became a US citizen. After being denied entry into the UK based on his status as a convicted felon, Shyne was deported back to Belize, where he pursued a career in politics. He spent some time living in Jerusalem before returning to Belize, where he remains active in his political career and hopes to become the country's next prime minister in 2025. Number 5. Fetty Wap. Most people know Willie Jr. Maxwell II by his stage name, Fetty Wap. He was about to perform at Citi Field in Queens, New York in 2021 when FBI agents stormed the scene and took him away in handcuffs. The rapper, who hails from New Jersey, was accused of being a drug dealer in a major drug ring that was based out of Long Island. Fetty Wap was among 6 suspects charged in connection with the alleged drug ring, including a former corrections officer from New Jersey. The group supposedly trafficked and sold over 100 kilos of potentially deadly controlled substances, including cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, and crack cocaine. From mid-2019 to June of 2020, they reportedly sourced the drugs from the West Coast and moved them to New York and New Jersey, where they distributed the substances locally. While carrying out search warrants, law enforcement yielded around $1.5 million in cash. They also discovered several kilos of cocaine and heroin, as well as a cache of guns and ammunition. 9 days after the arrest, Fetty Wap posted a $500,000 bond and was released, but he was forced to wear an ankle monitor. He was also ordered to submit to regular drug testing and to surrender his passport. Unfortunately, he got arrested for violating the terms of his release when he allegedly threatened to kill someone over FaceTime while brandishing a weapon. Fetty was taken back into custody and was originally looking at life in prison if convicted of all the charges he faced. But he opted to work out a plea deal with prosecutors. Then in 2022, he pleaded guilty to a federal drug charge in exchange for a sentence of at least 5 years in prison. Based on sentencing guidelines, the recommended punishment will range between 7 and 9 years. His sentencing hearing is set to take place in early 2023. Number 4. A$AP Rocky. 34-year-old Rakim Myers, better known as A$AP Rocky, is a successful rapper, music producer, and record executive from New York City. He's also the romantic partner of famous singer Rihanna, as well as the father of her child. But every now and then, his achievements are interrupted by unfortunate events, including run-ins with the criminal justice system dating back to 2006. In 2012 and 2013, A$AP Rocky was accused in 2 different assault cases, one of which landed him at the center of a civil lawsuit. The other case left him dealing with misdemeanor charges. In 2019, he was arrested for assault yet again in Sweden when a man named Mustafa Jafari accused the rapper of kicking, beating, and cutting him with broken bottles. Many noteworthy musicians and other celebrities were quick to support his release from custody and called for a boycott of Sweden to make their disapproval of the case known. He was ultimately given a suspended prison sentence and was fined $1,270. In early 2022, A$AP Rocky was arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department upon arriving in the city from a recent vacation with Rihanna. He was charged with assault with a deadly weapon in connection with a 2021 shooting that happened in Hollywood. Police seized several boxes of property from his house during a search warrant, and the case is ongoing. More recently, A$AP Rocky was among several artists who were victimized in a music leak of over 200 unreleased songs. As a result, he lost 2 of his songs, which is unfortunate, but definitely could have been worse, considering the fact that several other rappers lost as many as 20 records. Number 3. Takeoff. Kershnik Carey Ball, more commonly known as Takeoff, was a member of the rap trio Migos. After breaking onto the music scene in 2013, he became known as the group's best lyricist, something that his uncle and bandmate Quavo was quick to acknowledge. But he was unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time in late 2022 when the trio was sadly reduced to a duo. While attending a private party in Houston, Takeoff took a fatal bullet that authorities believe was meant for someone else. The rapper passed away when he was just 28 years old. In a statement, Police Chief Troy Finner described how the rapper was an innocent bystander during an argument over a dice game that turned violent, adding that, "We lost a good man." Finner said that Takeoff wasn't involved in the dice game or in the altercation that followed. Several weeks after his death, authorities charged 33-year-old Patrick Xavier Clark with murder. An alleged accomplice, 22-year-old Cameron Joshua, was charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm. Thousands of people showed up at Takeoff's funeral to pay their respects to the young rapper, whose life was needlessly cut short over what sounds to many like a petty disagreement he had nothing to do with. Number 2. Vanilla Ice. The American rapper Robert Matthew Van Winkle, or Vanilla Ice, hasn't been talked about much in the news in the last couple of years, and the few times he has, it wasn't for good reasons. One notable incident happened in 1999 when he guest starred on the MTV show called 25 Lame, where viewers voted on the lamest music videos of all time. According to the script, the has-been rapper was supposed to smash a tape of his song Ice Ice Baby with a bat. But he didn't end it there. He began swinging at furniture and other objects. The show's hosts were clearly shocked. Vanilla Ice kept going at it until producers finally intervened and told him that he needed to stop. He made headlines for another outburst that was captured on camera in 2016 when he missed his flight from Atlanta to Nebraska and was denied access to the plane. In the video, he could be seen leaning over the counter and complaining loudly to a Delta Airlines employee. According to the person who recorded the tantrum, the gate had closed 10 minutes before Vanilla Ice arrived, but Ice claimed that he'd been sitting nearby for over an hour and that he didn't hear any calls to board the flight. A customer who witnessed this told the rapper that he should have paid more attention to the monitors that display the flight details, and he responded by telling the man to shut up, uttering several other profanity-riddled statements under his breath. Vanilla Ice later apologized for his outburst on Twitter, but also defended his behavior in the same post, stating, "Wrong action, but my point was right." He further explained that he was running on no sleep and lots of caffeine when the incident took place. Number 1. Nehemiah Harden. Known to his fans as SpotemGottem, 19-year-old Nehemiah Harden made headlines for reasons other than his music in 2022. He was arrested for speeding on a jet ski in a restricted speed zone off the Florida coast near Jacksonville. The young rapper was spotted doing S-turns and carrying out other dangerous maneuvers near anchored boats. According to an affidavit, Harden failed to cooperate with law enforcement when he realized an officer was trying to pull him over for a traffic stop. Instead, he allegedly sped away and continued driving erratically, swerving around boats and swimmers. He kept trying to flee even when the officer turned his lights and siren on and began chasing him. However, the police eventually caught up with Harden and charged him with eluding law enforcement and reckless operation. It wasn't SpotemGottem's first run-in with the law either. In 2017, he was charged with carrying a concealed weapon and grand theft auto in Duval County, Florida. Then in 2021, he was arrested on suspicion of pointing a pistol at a parking garage attendant in Miami. He became a crime victim later that year when he was struck in the hip during a drive-by shooting.
Number 9. Disgruntled doctor opens fire. When violent crimes take place at a hospital, it's rarely at the hands of a doctor, but it does happen occasionally. And in 2017, a 45-year-old doctor named Henry Bello entered the Bronx Lebanon Hospital Center in New York City, armed with an AR-15 and opened fire. The hallways filled with smoke as employees dove beneath desks and ran for cover. Sadly, one doctor was killed and 5 others were seriously injured in the rampage. It was rumored that several of the victims would have likely died if they weren't at a hospital. where life-saving help was readily available. Still, in some situations, employees had to improvise. Reporting for the New York Times, Sarah Maslin-Neer described how witnesses recalled seeing staff members rip a fire hose out of the wall and use it as a tourniquet on one victim. When Bello was finished spraying bullets throughout the emergency room, he lit himself on fire and took his own life. Bello had previously worked at the hospital for around 6 months. He quit amid harassment allegations as an alternative to being fired. The doctor also faced criminal assault charges in an unrelated incident that occurred years earlier, suggesting that perhaps he suffered from underlying mental issues that he never got proper help for. His superiors at the hospital were unaware of his previous convictions during his employment there. For some reason or another, it didn't show up on his record during a background check. Investigators concluded that Bello snuck the AR-15 into the hospital under his lab coat, and while they were initially hesitant to say that they were certain of his motive, it seemed pretty clear that he was disgruntled about how his employment with the hospital had ended. Number 8. New mom loses everything. Tia Shipp was 22 weeks into her pregnancy when she could tell that something was wrong. So she drove to Baptist East Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee in September of 2022. She walked through the doors and went straight to the bathroom, where she prematurely gave birth to a baby boy. Tia's daughter was with her at the time and hit the emergency call button. Staff members rushed in to help, but in the chaos, she left her daughter's purse in the bathroom, along with her wallet and car keys. Before she thought to retrieve them, someone snatched the belongings and stole her car. Sadly, Tia's baby didn't make it, and the last thing she needed was more stress and heartbreak. According to her mother, Tamara Sandridge, who spoke with local station Fox 59, the thief not only made off with her vehicle, but every dollar she had to her name. Sandridge further explained that 9 nurses responded to the emergency call from the hospital bathroom, but not one of them thought to grab Tia's purse. In a statement, the hospital reassured the public that nobody else was injured or in danger, and that the crime didn't interrupt staff members' ability to treat Tia. The hospital also said that the Memphis Police Department was actively investigating the crime, but it's understandable that the situation brought little comfort to Tia and her family, who were left to start over as they were mentally and emotionally processing the loss of her baby. Number 7. A fatally long wait. One evening in June of 2022, a 77-year-old woman went to an emergency room in Wilmington, North Carolina with complaints of fever, vomiting, weakness, and an inability to stand, and a history of cancer. During triage, she was classified as an urgent patient, but staff members sent her back out into the waiting room and told her to sit down. The elderly patient wasn't seen until the next morning, around 5 hours after her vitals were initially taken. Just a few minutes after finally being taken back to her room, the woman coded. Doctors did everything they could to resuscitate her, but she was pronounced dead a few hours later when her family finally made the painful decision to stop all life-saving efforts. When the story broke, a nurse told local station WECT that the hospital wasn't struggling with a bed shortage, but that the facility was extremely understaffed. This resulted in entire hallways being blocked off and remaining unused. Another source told reporters that at one point, the hospital was short around 400 nurses. Following the patient's death, authorities received numerous complaints, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services launched an investigation. Due to the numerous deficiencies, the facility's Medicare contract was terminated. But the details surrounding the tragedy and whether anyone is at fault for the woman's death remains unclear. According to the last update, the hospital was making changes to get back in good standing with CMS. Number 6. Attempted baby theft. Deputies at the Riverside County Sheriff's Office in Southern California received an unusual call one morning during the summer of 2022 when someone reported that a woman entered a hospital in Moreno Valley posing as a newly hired nurse and tried to steal a newborn baby. The suspect, identified as 23-year-old Jacina Miron, allegedly gained access to a room where a new mom was staying with her baby. Miron then left the hospital with the infant in her possession. Staff members reportedly tried to stop Miron from leaving before they called security. Luckily, the baby's father caught up with her and took the child back, but she managed to flee the scene. Police arrested Miron at her home the following day and charged her with felony kidnapping. Inside her home, they found ultrasounds from 2 other pregnancies. According to Sheriff's Deputy Saul Fernandez, who spoke with the Washington Post, Miron allegedly confessed to posing as a nurse and said that she wanted to be close to a baby. A few weeks after the disturbing incident, the victim's attorney said that Miron spent around 45 minutes in the hospital before running off with the baby. Around 20 minutes of that time was spent in the new mother's room, where Miron reportedly changed the baby's diaper twice. The specific details surrounding the incident, including whether the suspect knew the baby's parents, are unclear. Shortly after Miron's arrest, another new mother came forward and said that a woman claiming to be a nurse offered to take her infant to a medical appointment. Unfortunately, the case is ongoing. Number 5. Accused of infidelity. In a terrifying act of violence that was captured on camera, a 30-year-old parolee named Nestor Hernandez shot 2 healthcare workers dead at a hospital in Dallas in late 2022. The victims, 45-year-old social worker Jacqueline Pokua and 63-year-old nurse Annette Flowers, were innocent bystanders who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hernandez's girlfriend had just given birth moments earlier. He immediately became angry, thinking she'd cheated on him, and took his anger out on the 2 innocent women who lost their lives. Police shot Hernandez in the leg and took him into custody before he could claim a 3rd victim. According to an arrest warrant, he began acting paranoid about his girlfriend's alleged infidelity shortly before the shooting. He searched her hospital room to make sure nobody was in there, then pulled out a handgun and hit her in the head repeatedly with it. Hernandez placed some disturbing calls and text messages to relatives and told his girlfriend that they were both going to die that day. After that, he opened fire. Hernandez had recently spent 100 days in jail after violating his parole for a previous aggravated robbery conviction by cutting off his ankle monitor. It was his 2nd parole violation, but he did his time for it, and there was no longer any reason to keep him behind bars. Hernandez still had an ankle monitor when the shooting at the hospital occurred, but he had permission to be there. Some have described his alleged crimes as a gross failure of the justice system, and have questioned why he was even free in the first place, given the nature of his prior offenses. Number 4. Inmate versus guard. An inmate was being treated in the emergency room at a hospital in Dayton, Ohio one day in 2022 when he overwhelmed an armed guard and stole his gun. He fatally shot the guard and ran out to the parking lot before turning the gun on himself. Police clarified that the guard wasn't a corrections officer overseeing the patient, but an employee of a private security firm that the local sheriff's office had worked with for over 2 decades. Nothing like this had ever happened before. While authorities withheld the names of the inmate and the guard, they revealed that the prisoner was brought to the hospital after complaining that he felt sick. He was in custody on suspicion of a probation violation and that his past offenses consisted of minor drug and traffic-related offenses. In other words, there was no reason to suspect that he might violently lash out and kill someone. Following the tragedy, Montgomery County Sheriff Rob Streck ordered deputies to stay with any inmates who go to the hospital. He reassured the public that it's somewhat unusual for prisoners to only be under the supervision of private guards rather than law enforcement, but he admitted that it depended on the offender's circumstances and history. Number 3. Gunfire at the ER. An emergency room is typically somewhere a person goes when they've been shot, not somewhere where they go and get shot. But the latter is unfortunately known to happen from time to time. During the early morning hours one day in December of 2022, police in the Chicago suburb of Oak Lawn received a call about a large and disruptive gathering outside Advocate Christ Medical Center. Upon arriving, officers overheard a gunshot coming from the direction of a group of people who were gathered near the entrance. They found 28-year-old Brandon McGee on the ground with a bullet wound to his left eye. Doctors attempted to save McGee's life, but he tragically succumbed to his injuries. In the meantime, police identified 36-year-old Marquess Rose as the prime suspect in the case and claimed that they saw him fleeing on foot. They also recovered a revolver at the scene. Rose was out on bond for various other charges at the time of the shooting. He also has 5 felony convictions, including burglaries and gun-related crimes. According to prosecutors, both Rose and the victim attended gatherings that took place somewhere earlier in the evening on the night of the shooting. They've accused the suspect of being among a group of people who followed McGee to the hospital. An argument erupted between the two men, and McGee allegedly shoved Rose to the ground. Even after taking some time to cool off, the pair reportedly went back to fighting with one another, and it ended in deadly gunfire. The case is still under investigation, and Rose is currently being held without bond. Number 2. Complications in Quebec. Usually, when someone is unhappy with what's going on in an emergency room, it's a patient or a patient's loved ones, but it's somewhat rare for an actual doctor to raise the alarm. However, this was exactly what Dr. Sébastien Marin did in October 2022, after a man waited 16 hours for care and died at an ER in Quebec. Marin, who works at Barrie Memorial Hospital in Ormstown, said that the man came to his emergency room hoping for a quicker treatment after waiting 16 hours elsewhere. But within minutes of arriving at Barrie, the man had an aneurysm and died. Speaking with CTV News, Marin said that it was frustrating to know that the patient did what he was supposed to do by seeking help during a medical emergency, only to die right in front of staff members. He further explained that there was no guarantee that the man would have survived if he had received treatment earlier, but that he would have had a much better chance. Marin blamed the problem on overcrowding at local hospitals. In a series of tweets, he described how there was little he could do besides offer his condolences to the patient's family once the aneurysm had done its damage. At the time the man sought treatment, 6 out of 8 hospitals in the region were over capacity, and at least one hospital was at double capacity. The situation left Marin and others feeling understandably frustrated. Patients with treatable conditions were risking their lives by no fault of their own by seeking much-needed medical care. However, they had no choice but to wait longer than they should have to for life-saving treatment. Marin said that he hoped his tweets helped raise awareness that could lead to change within the struggling healthcare system. And at number 1, failed escape. In late 2022, 36-year-old inmate Joshua Leon Wright was transported from a jail in Hays County, Texas, to a local hospital for medical treatment. During his time there, he allegedly assaulted the corrections officer overseeing him and ran out into the hallway. The officer opened fire on Wright, and doctors quickly began to perform life-saving measures. Unfortunately, Wright died from his injuries. It's unclear whether Wright was armed or if he posed a threat to the officer or anyone else at the hospital. Rumors quickly began to circulate regarding the incident, some saying that Wright's feet were shackled or that he was shot in the back multiple times, while others claimed that the officer had a taser but didn't use it. To understand what's true and what's not, investigators will have to take a closer look at the situation and sift through the details one by one. In a statement, Judge Ruben Becerra said that the people of Hays County deserve answers about what happened. The officer who shot Wright was placed on administrative leave, which is customary after any shooting involving an officer. At the moment, the Texas Rangers are actively investigating the incident.
Number 8. Celina Powell. Celina Powell became famous, or perhaps infamous, as a rap superfan and for allegedly dating well-known rappers. She captured widespread attention with her YouTube channel, where she discussed her trysts and made some shocking allegations against various rappers, including claiming that Snoop Dogg cheated on his wife with her. Powell also claimed that the musician Offset got her pregnant during an affair, and that Trey Songz committed disturbing acts of misconduct against her. She also dated the recently deceased singer Aaron Carter, and said that Drake changed his number after she bombarded him with unwanted nude photos. Many of Celina's claims have been disproven, but some remain questionable. The controversial social media star, who's originally from Denver, had her first major brush with the law in 2015 when she was accused of driving a getaway car after a robbery. She continued to rack up warrants and charges over the following years for numerous alleged crimes, including shoplifting, evading police, traffic offenses, and repeatedly violating probation. By 2018, Powell had outstanding bonds totaling $61,000. Right before the 2019 New Year, she was nabbed by a bounty hunter in Aurora, Colorado. In 2022, she was sentenced to 2 years in prison for failing to comply with the terms of her probation, which included court-mandated drug and alcohol tests. In the meantime, the rap gossip grapevine has one less chronic meddler to worry about. Number 7. Wisdom Awute. One night in May 2021, 2 people were seriously injured in a shooting in Miami Beach. Police reported to the scene shortly before midnight on Ocean Drive, a famous street known for its Art Deco hotels. Near a restaurant, they found 2 victims, one with a gunshot wound to the shoulder and the other who was shot in the leg. They were rushed to a nearby hospital. One victim was treated and released, while the other was paralyzed and remained hospitalized in critical condition. Officers arrested 29-year-old Christopher Urena and 21-year-old rapper Wisdom Awute, who's a member of DaBaby's billion-dollar baby entertainment label. DaBaby was detained for questioning regarding the incident, but was released a day later with no charges against him. Urena and Awute were both accused of pulling a gun and shooting at the victims. They were charged with attempted first-degree murder with a deadly weapon and aggravated assault, and Urena faced additional charges of grand theft and being a felon in possession of a weapon. The outcome of the case is unclear, and the trouble didn't end there. In 2022, DaBaby and Wisdom reportedly got into a fistfight backstage during a concert. Footage of the incident shows DaBaby throwing the first punch. Wisdom immediately fought back, but a security guard quickly intervened and broke up the brawl. It's unclear what led up to the fight, or if it affected DaBaby and Wisdom's business relationship. Number 6. Shantel Callaway. Back in the early 2000s, Shantel Callaway was known as a party girl from Atlanta who regularly turned up at major celebrity parties and events throughout the South. She made a name for herself during the MySpace days, when she posted photos of herself with musicians like John Legend and Kid Capri on her profile, as well as NBA players including Gary Payton and Paul Pierce. Callaway was also an avid Twitter user who described herself in her bio as an event planner and marketing genius. But her days became much less carefree in 2011 when she was accused of robbing a bank. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Callaway allegedly entered an Atlanta area financial institution in disguise and handed the teller a note demanding cash. A responding officer reportedly saw her leave the scene and detained her, at which point she was no longer wearing her disguise. In the meantime, police recovered the disguise with the help of a canine unit. After squaring away her legal troubles, Shantel refocused her energy away from the celebrity scene and pursued her dream of becoming an entrepreneur. She created a game called Rhyme Antics, which is described on its website as a hilarious rhyming vocabulary game inspired by hip-hop. Designed for players aged 12 and up, the rules require participants to freestyle in proper English using any of 12,000 different vocabulary terms, including words that are used on the SAT college admissions test. Callaway told Black Enterprise that she and her family were tired of playing conventional vocabulary games like Catchphrase and Taboo. She said that her mission was to promote literacy at a time when there's a literacy crisis in the US that isn't being talked about, which seems infinitely more fulfilling than partying with famous people. Number 5. Lori Mattix. Some of the most iconic musicians of all time reached the height of their fame in the 1970s. A woman named Lori Mattix, also known as Lori Maddox, would later claim that during that time she had affairs with David Bowie, Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page, Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger, and various other celebrities. Based on her timeline, this would mean that she was just a teenager during her involvement with all 3 men. The so-called baby groupie began frequenting clubs along West Hollywood Sunset Strip just months before she allegedly began dating Jimmy Page. Mattix claimed that Led Zeppelin's manager basically kidnapped her and snuck her to Page's hotel room, and that Page went to great lengths to conceal the relationship due to her age. She said she broke up with him a few years later after catching him in bed with a Playboy model. But if everything Mattix says is true, then she also wasn't exactly faithful during her relationship with Paige, because she supposedly began seeing David Bowie just a year after she met Paige. This, along with her contradictory stories about losing her virginity to both Bowie and Paige, are among the reasons that some of her claims have been called into question. Mattix's account of her relationship with Paige is generally accepted as true, but her connections to Bowie and Jagger are disputed. She claimed that she met Jagger in 1975 during a joint recording session with 3 members of the Beatles, but by then, the Beatles were long broken up, and the last known recording session between former band members had taken place the year before. Mattix's authenticity is questionable, but she had a verified presence on the celebrity scene as a young woman, and there seems to be at least a grain of truth to her stories, which highlight the era's culture and attitude toward inappropriate relationships between major celebrities and underage groupies. Number 4. Chi-Wah Soo. David Bowie was performing in Rochester, New York in 1976 when a breathtaking young woman in the front row named Chi-Wah Soo caught his eye. He slipped her a handwritten note inviting her to his after-party, and she obliged. Soon, Chi-Wah Soo and 2 other attractive women were rubbing elbows with Bowie and fellow rock icon Iggy Pop in Bowie's private hotel suite. From the sound of it, the hosts cut no corners when it came to party favors and extracurricular activities, but the festivities were cut short when someone called Bowie and told him that his wife was missing and his son was sick. He soon realized that it was a prank call, but things continued to go downhill from there. Little did anyone at the gathering know, 2 of the attendees were undercover police officers. They were working the party as part of a sting after local law enforcement received a tip that Bowie had cocaine. A vice squad stationed in the room next door was listening to the group's conversations. Someone in Bowie's entourage asked one of the undercovers if they knew where to score some marijuana. Just a moment later, police stormed into the room and arrested Bowie, Iggy Pop, Soo, and Bowie's bodyguards. They weren't in jail for long. Bowie paid everyone's bail and soon moved on to his next scheduled tour stop. If convicted of the charges, the defendants could have faced up to 15 years in prison. Luckily, a grand jury dropped all 4 cases, sparing everyone involved from any time behind bars. Soo and Bowie never spoke again, and Bowie never returned to Rochester. In response to false allegations that she was a snitch behind the arrest, Soo told a local reporter that people had the wrong idea about her. She stayed famously silent about the incident after that. Soo went on to open a beauty salon in Brighton, New York that she still owns today. When she finally opened up about the arrest more than 40 years later in 2017, she told filmmaker Matt Ehlers that she gave Bowie her traditional Chinese wedding blanket at their arraignment, and that she thinks she may have inspired his hit song China Girl. Number 3. Britney Harris. During the America's Most Wanted hip-hop festival in West Palm Beach, Florida in 2013, an employee found 2 unsupervised young children standing in the parking lot together, surrounded by drunk concert goers. 2 hours later, the worker noticed that the kids were still alone and approached them. They reportedly told him that their mom left them in the car while she attended the concert. The children were turned over to the sheriff's deputies, who located their mother, 25-year-old hip-hop model Britney Harris, at the end of the show. Harris, also known as Pretty Red, initially claimed that her cousin brought the kids to the venue, according to an arrest report, but she allegedly eventually admitted that she left them in the parking lot while she attended the event. Some news sources reported that she ditched her kids to take advantage of some backstage passes to meet Lil Wayne, but it's unclear whether these claims are true. Harris was charged with 2 counts of child neglect. While the outcome of the case is unclear, she appears to have moved past her legal troubles and is now a registered nurse with a social media following of about 120,000 people, making her a small-time celebrity in her own right. Number 2. Cathy Smith. Canadian-born rock groupie Cathy Smith landed her first big break in the 1970s as a backup singer for Gordon Lightfoot. She was also his mistress, and the relationship between the two was volatile, to say the least. At one point, Lightfoot even fired his opening act for allegedly flirting with Smith. She was also mentioned in the paperwork when Lightfoot and his wife split in what became one of the most expensive divorces in Canadian history. After leaving her gig with Lightfoot in 1976, Smith went to work for various other musicians and celebrities, during which time she developed an addiction to heroin. As her habit worsened, she became a drug dealer who catered to the rich and famous, including Rolling Stone members Ron Wood and Keith Richards. After moving to Los Angeles, Smith reconnected with Saturday Night Live cast member John Belushi, whom she had met during a previous performance on the show. Except this time, Belushi was more interested in the drugs she was selling than her singing talent. In 1982, he was found dead from what appeared to be an accidental drug overdose. The details surrounding Belushi's death remained obscure until several months later, when Smith allegedly admitted to the National Enquirer that she administered the fatal injection. In the days leading up to Belushi's death, he and Smith went on a drug binge. During that time, Smith injected Belushi multiple times with a combination of heroin and cocaine, commonly known as a speedball. She later denied killing Belushi, but ultimately pled no contest to involuntary manslaughter and received a 3-year sentence. After serving 15 months, Smith was deported back to Canada, where she worked as a legal secretary and kept a low profile until her death in 2020 at the age of 73. Number 1. Cape Cookies. Starting in the late 1950s, the US and the Soviet Union became entangled in a frenzied competition for superiority in outer space. Known as the space race, the era saw unprecedented space travel as the two nations vied to be the first to achieve major milestones, including putting a man on the moon. The astronauts who participated in these historic missions became major celebrities. They attracted huge followings of starstruck young women who fawned over them, essentially giving them rock star status. Nicknamed Cape Cookies, some of these superfans were quick to take up on the chance to get lucky with strapping space travelers, most of whom were married. Consequently, infidelity was rife among the ranks of NASA's most famous employees. After all, the human race doesn't exactly have a good track record for resisting temptation. Only 7 out of the 30 astronauts' marriages survived the 60s, and while it takes 2 to tango, one can only imagine, or at least hope, that at least some of the mistresses felt a tinge of regret after coming to their senses and realizing that they were a willing party to a trend that caused pain to a lot of families. In today's world, being busted for having an affair leads to plenty of divorces, but it doesn't necessarily ruin someone's career. It was a much different story 50 or 60 years ago, especially when it came to NASA, which expected its employees to uphold a public image according to the standards and respectability that defined the era. Divorce was heavily frowned upon and could easily cost an astronaut their job, regardless of the circumstances. At the time, women also had far fewer options for supporting themselves as they do now. For these reasons, many wives were pressured into staying with their unfaithful astronaut husbands longer than they wanted to, for the sake of the family breadwinner keeping his job. Along with their reluctance to pursue a divorce, they suffered silently, keeping their husbands' dirty secrets on the low while projecting a public image of the perfect all-American wife and mother. In that sense, NASA's no-nonsense policy had the unintended effect of prolonging toxic marriages rather than discouraging astronauts from cheating on their spouses. And it's probably safe to assume that some of the Cape Cookies who had affairs with married astronauts endured painful consequences of their own, including perhaps being labeled as a homewrecker. Thanks for watching. Would you rather appear in national tabloids as a wannabe celebrity who follows famous people around like a lost puppy dog? Or be forced to move away from your loved ones due to small-town rumors, but given the opportunity to start over in a new place where nobody knows who you are? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!